right, so Mo, what single player do you see as the biggest X factor in the finals?
For me, it's Chris Bosh. I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier during the regular season. Both meetings, win and loss, he led the Heat in scoring, 24 points. And I feel like that kind of talks about like how he's going to stretch the floor, and whether or not he can really knock down those shots is going to be really key, and whether or not the San Antonio Spurs can find a solution for his three-point shooting, because I don't think Tim Duncan can really defend the three that well. And then I think, but a really bigger for Bosh is going to be to see how he defends Tim Duncan, because I think if you're Spoelstra for as much as you can, you want to have Chris Anderson guarding
Duncan.
Yeah, guarding Duncan, but obviously Chris Anderson is like, he's a role player. He tops out at 15 minutes a game, and he gives you a really good high energy 15 minutes. But for the rest of that, a lot of it's going to be Chris on Tim, because there's no one else who really has that size to compete.
And I don't think Anderson is a great matchup on Bosh. I mean, Anderson has always been Anderson on Tim Duncan, because Anderson's always been sort of a hyper athletic defender who can sort of leap up from behind and get a ton of blocks. But it takes a different kind of post defense against Duncan. Yeah. He's always shifting around, always doing double moves, always sort of sneaking in under the basket for little scoops, layups and stuff, and or pump faking players out of position. So I don't see Anderson on Duncan as a very favorable matchup for the Heat. So that places even more of a burden on Bosh defensively.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What about you guys? X factors?
For me, the biggest X factor for the Spurs is Danny Green. Danny Green's kind of a classic Popovich find. He was kind of overshadowed at UNC by Ty Lawson and Tyler Hansbrough, but
Psycho T.
But Popovich found him and just found the perfect role for him, and now Danny Green is one of the most underrated players in the game, in my opinion. He really has the ability to change a game and on the offensive end and go off. In one of the games against OKC, when they stuck Durant on him, Durant just couldn't stay with him, and Green just lit it up and scored so many points on so many threes. So I think that he also has the ability to miss a lot of shots. Last year in one game he went 1 for 12, and
he went cold.
They
really needed him in games.
Yeah, if he had just made a couple of those,
that would have been big.
Yeah, so I think that Danny Green is really critical for the Spurs on offense.
I'll ask you, what do you think about Danny Green though on the defensive side? You just said they did stick him and it was effective. They stuck him on Kevin Durant. Do you think they'll put him on LeBron or Wade, or what type of strategy do you think they're gonna employ as far as what role is he gonna play on defense?
I see Kawhi Leonard as the main person who's gonna defend LeBron, but
Wade.
Yeah, I think he could see a lot of time on Wade. I don't think Danny Green's really known for his defense, but I think that he's adequate enough to throw on LeBron and Wade at times.
And I think the onus is really on the Spurs to get Green big games. He's not going to be a guy who comes in and gets himself 25 points. It's all about setting screens that he can sprint around or moving the ball around the perimeter and getting him open looks in the corner. And sort of, I think Danny Green is almost sort of a barometer of how well the Spurs offense is humming. If their offense is going well, he's going to be getting open looks, and when Danny Green gets open looks, he almost always puts them in. But if their offense is kind of struggling, he's going to be taking more contested shots, and he's a guy who can score 5 or 25 on any given night.
And especially with Parker out, Parker's really a guy who runs the offense a lot and creates a lot of the offense, but Danny Green actually has the ability to have plays run for him, just to shoot threes. So I think if Parker's out, he could really be important for the Spurs to provide some offense from the guards.
Yeah. My X factor would probably be Kawhi Leonard. Leonard's not a guy who's going to go off for a huge offensive game, but he can impact the game in so many different ways. His length on defense, he has a huge wingspan. his ability to create turnovers. He's great on transition. He's the one guy on the Spurs who will ever catch an alley-oop, that's for sure. He's one of the league's biggest emerging stars. It's hard for me to get my head around the fact that he's 22 again.
Yeah.
As the Spurs' sort of main athletic young wing player, I think he's going to have a huge role in this series.
For me, he definitely did have a little bit of a disappointing regular season. He didn't make the huge jump people thought he would this year, but I feel that like the playoffs, he's been playing really consistent, good basketball, and this I feel like this series might actually be a good opportunity for him to kind of have like a coming out party in like the same style that kind of Paul George had against the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Just kind of get to that next level of player.
And I think you mentioned it earlier. The biggest thing Leonard can do, I don't care what he does on offense, the biggest thing Leonard can do is limit the damage LeBron does.
Yeah.
Last year in the finals, when the Heat were down, LeBron I think had 3 30-point games in the last 4 games of the series. And just if you can keep LeBron under 30 throughout the series, he'll get his looks, but if you can keep him from having those huge games where he's just unstoppable, that's the biggest impact that Leonard can have.
Good. Alright. Now that we've gotten our whiteboard, let's take a look at who has the edge in a few different categories. First off, guards. Mark?
Yeah, so I'll start us off with guard play. So I'm going to give the edge in guard play to San Antonio. I know Miami has Wade. I know Chalmers and Cole have stepped up in big games in the past. But I think San Antonio has so many guards that can threaten you in different ways. You've got Parker, who is as good as anyone in the NBA at getting into the paint, and he has his classic spin layups.
Oh, yeah.
He's tough to stop on the inside. You have Mills, who we've mentioned, he's kind of an irrational confidence guy. He'll walk up there, take a 30-foot three, and a surprising amount of the time it'll go in. And I think that with an offense as disciplined as the Spurs have, it's good to have someone who will take an ill-advised shot every now and then. Because those are the kinds of shots that can provide a momentum boost or get the crowd going. They've got Ginobili, of course, who I think has really stepped it up this year in particular, after seeming to slow down in the finals a bit last year, who has a knack for doing the unexpected, sudden drives to the hoop or pulling up from 3, crazy passes. You had this amazing pass along the baseline to Green in the Thunder series. And then finally you've got Green, who will, threes is all you need to know about Green. So I'm going to give the edge in guard play to the Spurs.
All right.
I'm going to keep hosting it. So.
All right, next up, big men. Gabe, what do you think?
So for this series, I'm going to give the edge to the Spurs. For big men, the key matchup really here is Bosh-Duncan, which is a really interesting matchup. As we talked about before, Bosh has really emerged as a 3-point threat for the Heat. Last year he had no threes in the finals, which is pretty astounding when you consider the role he has now. But I think that it's really going to come down to more than just Duncan to stop Bosh. Duncan's really going to be important in defending the paint, especially with a team with both Wade and LeBron. He can't really just always stick with Bosh on the perimeter.
Who do you think, Diao or?
Well, I think it's more just going to come down to like San Antonio's ability to play team defense and just not let Bosh get like wide open shots.
Yeah, because with his 3-point ability, he's much more of a matchup problem now than when he was a more conventional mid-range player.
Yeah, I think the Spurs would be okay if he shot a lot of mid-range shots, but it's the threes that will really kill them. And then on the other end, I still give the edge to Duncan. Duncan's just such a good post player, and Bosh's defense is good, but I think that the Spurs should be able to exploit that matchup on the offensive end.
I'd agree.
What about bench players, Gabe? Who do you think has the advantage when it comes to that second unit?
So again, I'm going to give the advantage to the Spurs here.
Spurs,
shocker. The Spurs, just as we talked about before, have such a deep bench, and as Mark mentioned before, first team since 1976 not to have a player average 30 minutes a game or more. So, and then we also talked about how a lot of the Heat bench has kind of declined. So,
that's a pretty clear one.
Yeah, for here it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Miller's gone. Shane Battier's pretty much like phoned it in as far as his basketball career goes. He just signed a contract with ESPN, I think yesterday. Mario Chalmers hasn't really had that same stroke from three. Who else?
And I think just the thing with the Spurs is they'll go like 10 games without playing a guy, and then they'll slip him in at a crucial moment. Like,
and I'll just step up.
Who would have saw Matt Bonner starting the last game against the Thunder?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not. It's not like he had a huge game, but Popovich's ability to tinker with the bench and sort of mix things up can really create chaos in a series.
I think just every single player on the Spurs has a role, and every player can step in and do something.
Jeff Ayers, Austin Day, you never know.
You haven't seen him yet, but you might in this series.
All right, Mo, two of the game's best coaches. Who has the edge in this series?
Well, I'm actually going to give this one to the Heat. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm going to pop all the way.
Great.
Coaching,
Man.
I mean, credit where credit is due. Eric Spoelstra's really come into his own as a coach the last couple seasons. I think definitely, like, the main thing is you see with the adjustments. I think you can see, even in the Pacers series, whenever something really wasn't going right, the Pacers getting on a run, Spoelstra really has that uncanny ability to figure out exactly what's wrong, call a timeout, and really fix it.
And people doubted Spoelstra. I mean, so much that first year in Miami when they lost to Dallas in the finals. But he actually kind of revolutionized the game and showing a willingness to go small.
Yeah,
playing
he's
LeBron
the first person
positions.
to really introduce the idea of small ball, and we kind of see how it's become prevalent with all these other teams in the NBA. And so I think you have to give Eric Spoelstra credit to a certain extent. But I mean, come on, it's Greg Popovich. He's best coach in the NBA by a long shot. And I think for every bit of a tactician that Spoelstra is, Greg Popovich is more. And then the other thing, which I kind of think really sets them apart, is what I'm going to call like the Mark Jackson factor. It's the idea that you have your players who really care about you as a coach and want to play for you. Like while the Miami Heat players, I feel like they listen to Spoelstra. Sometimes you get the idea that they don't really respect him. There's a couple times where you've seen Miami Heat players snap back at Spoelstra or get emotional in his face, and no one would dare do anything like that to Greg Popovich. I mean, this guy's been through the military. He's really like a general with these guys, but at the same time, they really do care for him and they play hard for him. And seeing as this series may or may not be his last one as an NBA coach, I feel like the Spurs players are really going to put in the extra mile.
Yeah, I think just like look at the way that Popovich has made the whole Spurs team focus on the team before the player. There are a lot of players who just have embraced their role, and it may not be the superstar role that they were looking for when they came into the NBA, but they've embraced it so much, and that's what really makes the Spurs run.
Yeah, he's really the heart of this team, and I think if you're going to give them the advantage anywhere, we have given them the advantage everywhere, but you got to give it to them in coaching. It's going to be their biggest advantage.
All right, Mo, so do you want to talk about the last thing we have listed here, home court advantage?
Well, I mean, this one, it's not even really a comparison. There's no qualitative thing to it. It's pretty quantitative. The Spurs do have the home court advantage. They had the better regular season record, and I think this is going to be huge for them. I think one very interesting thing to look out for as it comes to the home court advantage will be change. It actually, one major complaint that a lot of players and like coaches and fans in the NBA in general had was the format of the games as it pertains to like home and away. And last year with the finals, it went on a 2-3-2 basis, as in 2 San Antonio, 3 in Miami, then back 2 for San Antonio. Whereas this playoffs switched over to a 2-2-1-1-1 format. And I think this will be really interesting because there's a few different situations. Say after Game 5, the Spurs go up 3-2, they'll have that opportunity to try to close out in Miami, and if they fail there, they'll still have the home court advantage going into Game 7. So I think this will change things. Although I don't think although the Spurs fans are a great fan base, I don't feel like they'll have that strong of an impact on the games as much as just like the general idea of home court advantage.
I do think the Spurs fans will be pretty into it this series, though. I mean, as any fan base would be in any finals,
Right.
but especially recognizing that it's really nearing the end of the Big Three era, and they haven't won a championship in a long time. It's a revenge series for them, so I think the home court.
All right, yeah, that's fair.
Will be a
I
bit more
feel like
intense.
another thing you have to look at is the Heat actually aren't that great of an away team. This season they were 22 and 19 away from home. That's like barely above 500. Whereas the Spurs were 30 and 11 away from home. So you can kind of see there, like the home court advantage actually might play big for the Spurs if it goes down to a Game 7.
Okay, guys, so when we look at this board, it looks like the Spurs are going to win in a blowout. We gave them every single category, but do you guys think that there's anywhere where the Heat actually hold an advantage?
I think there is one small area, and that area would be LeBron.
Yeah. The Spurs do lack LeBron.
And the Heat have LeBron.
It's definite.
It is true.
And I'm going to put 5 checks in the LeBron box because I think that even if we feel the Spurs hold the advantage in these other 5 areas, LeBron himself balances this whole series out and quite possibly swings it in the Heat's way. I mean, the Heat do many great things as a team. They have great ball movement, getting guys open in the corner. They have great team defense when they're committed to it. In Game 6 against Indiana, they were just swarming the Pacers, creating havoc all over the place. But in the end, it all revolves around LeBron, who I think we can agree Durant was the MVP, but LeBron is still the league's most dominant force.
Better player. And I would actually say to add on to that, one advantage that the Miami Heat might have is actually maybe in terms of scheduling. I think if you kind of look at it, like the Eastern Conference this year has been pretty much an AAU league. Like the teams that they had to go through, they swept the Bobcats without even trying. They took Brooklyn in 5, and it didn't look like that was much of an effort on anyone's part. And then the Pacers, although it went to 6 games, they really didn't feel like it went to 6 games. You kind of always had that underlying feeling that like LeBron had this. So I think they had a little bit more rest going into Thursday. I think they'll definitely be the more well-rested team coming into this finals matchup.
I just think LeBron obviously really defines the series. I mean, he'll be getting his 38 and 7 every game, but if LeBron turns in, if he has another 49-point game, or if he gets a triple-double, something like that, if he has one of his sort of
transcendent games,
one of his sort of historic performances, then that'll be tough for the Spurs to overcome.
Yeah, I think in the NBA, a lot of times we run into the team with the best player wins, and so that's just something the Spurs are going to have to overcome.
But if there's
any team that can, it's the Spurs. I mean, they literally just overcame it. I think it's safe to say Kevin Durant is the best player in the Spurs Thunder series, and
for sure.
Spurs won 6. So
it's true. Yeah,
anything can happen. But I do agree that's a good rule of thumb. NBA.
All right, we're getting close to making our picks for the series. Thanks to those of you who have stuck around this whole time.
But before we do that, we're gonna ask Mo for some bold predictions on this series.
Thanks, Gabe. I've got 3 bold predictions for you. First up, Tim Duncan plays more minutes than any other player in this series.
Whoa.
Spurs or Heat.
That's bold right there.
Thanks, Mark. So basically, I think what's going to happen is you kind of imagine it, if the Spurs go out and win this, there's no reason that Tim Duncan shouldn't just retire, go out on top just like Ray Lewis did a couple years ago with the Ravens. I feel like that'll just be the storybook ending. Maybe even Pop retires with him and they drive off into the sunset. I feel like that would be just like a great closing in his chapter, like pass the torch over to Kawhi to begin this next era of Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the Spurs continuing to compete with this core for like 5 more years. Duncan could play into his mid-40s, I bet. But I agree that
but
it'd be so
if he wins now, I think it's just
yeah.
It's a good time. It's a good time to call it quits, and I think for that reason, I think he's gonna see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think he's really gonna go all in on this series. I feel like this is gonna take a lot out of him, and it's gonna give them all he can to the team.
Well, that's one. That's definitely
one.
gold.
Right. Second, Dwayne Wade scores 45 plus points in at least one game this series.
Okay.
I believe. I predict that at one point this series, I think Kawhi Leonard's going to have one game where he really steps up. And I don't think it's going to be on a regular basis, but I think for at least one game, there's going to be the type of situation where he's going to lock down LeBron. And I think even, like, LeBron is, like, he's obviously one of the best players of all time, but, like, he has his off nights. Everyone has their off nights. And I feel like there'll be a night where LeBron really isn't feeling it. But I imagine it being one of those games where the Heat really do need to win it. Like, they're down 2-1, or it's like, or it's even maybe a game to close-out game. And I feel like that's when Dwayne Wade's really gonna step up. I think him and his shaky knees will go out with one last huge performance for the Heat, and I think he's gonna have a 45.
Yeah, Wade's another guy. We don't really know how much longer he's gonna play for. He's been so injured the last couple of years, so. He's another guy.
Yeah, they've really been
This is a big series for his career.
Yeah, people underestimate Wade, though. I mean, he's overshadowed by LeBron now, but people forget that he was the guy when Miami won their first championship, and he carried them to that. So.
And, third predictions
better be good.
Yeah. I think we were talking a little bit about Kawhi Leonard, and this prediction's actually about Kawhi Leonard. I think he's gonna average more than 18.5 points this series.
All right.
The way I see it going down is I don't think LeBron's actually going to spend that much time D'ing up Leonard. I feel like Leonard gets underestimated a lot. He only put up 12.5 points, I think it was, this regular season. And I feel like LeBron will take that as an invitation to kind of drift and go and try to be more of the man in the paint because, let's face it, Chris Bosh isn't really that, like, kind of commanding, like, Ibaka-type defender that will really, like, keep people looking for, like, jump shots. So I think LeBron will look to guard the 4s and 5s that the Spurs put out. And I think it's going to allow Kawhi Leonard to sneak in a couple of high-scoring performances that will bring his average up to above an 18.5.
Yeah, and I think the Heat will be keying on Green a lot too after last year's finals.
I don't think anyone wants to get torched like that again.
But Leonard's definitely a capable 3-point shooter, so
yeah,
be interesting to see.
I think he'll be able to use his athleticism to get some easy offensive rebound putbacks. I think he's a real scrapper, so it'll be interesting to see. I think he'll eke out some extra points.
Cool.
All right, so now when we look after the series is done, what is at stake? Like, what does this series mean for each of these franchises going forwards?
Honestly, I think not just for these franchises, but I think this is a very defining series for just this era of basketball. If you're thinking about it, this is really the post-Jordan era, and what we kind of see is like a few teams trying to fill that void of being that dominant team. I mean, for a while we had the Lakers with Magic, and then the short interlude with the Detroit Bad Boys, and then it was mostly Jordan up through the late 90s. So I think where the NBA's kind of been searching for that team to fill that void. And if we look at post Jordan championships, the San Antonio Spurs lead the league with 4. They won in '99, they won in '03, they won in '05, and they won in '07. And so I feel like if they're able to win this series, I believe they'll really solidify themselves in history as one of those legendary, one of the best teams of this era. And if it goes the other way, if LeBron and D-Wade can really put together the three-peat, the three-peat's only been done, I think, a couple times. Yeah, Bill Russell, and then Jordan, I think it is pretty much they've been able to pull off.
And then I think Kobe and Shaq.
Might have pulled it off. I think they only got 2. but
Well,
I'm
anyway.
not sure. Anyways,
We'll probably cut that.
but in any case, I think if they're able to get the three-peat, this will really be a defining moment for LeBron and will really add to his kind of like validation in the GOAT conversation.
I think, as we touched upon earlier, this is also kind of a series of like the best talent versus the best system. Like everyone always thinks of the NBA as you need the very top talent to win a championship. But the Spurs are really based on a system run by a amazing coach and just the perfect role players for. So I think that if the Spurs win, it really proves that the top talent is beatable, and that's been a big theme of the NBA in the past decade.
Yeah, I mean, last year you had the Nuggets getting some people excited that without
no real super. We haven't really seen that maybe like
their best player might have been
since maybe like Detroit.
Yeah, their best player might have been like Ty Lawson, but this year more than ever, the Spurs are starting to embody that with no stars kind of team. Again, with I think the under 30 minutes for all players speaks to it more than anything. And I just think I mean a Spurs win that would give them championships 15 years apart with largely the same core.
Yeah.
And that would kind of
15 years.
And they've had more than 50 wins for 15 years in a row too. So this would just kind of cap off what's been an incredible run for that franchise.
Yeah.
So finally, it's the segment you've all been waiting for. We're gonna give you our official picks for the 2014 NBA Finals. So let's start with Gabe.
I will be taking the Spurs in 7. I think Duncan is gonna pull out another championship for the Spurs, who have it's been since 2007 since they've won, and they're finally going to get that next championship.
I'm going to go with the Heat in 7. We've talked a lot about how the Spurs have improved since last year, and the Heat have declined a bit. And last year's series was as tight as an NBA Finals has ever been. So you might think that would tip me towards the Spurs, but I can't pick against LeBron until he loses. He just seems like such an unstoppable force right now, so I'm going to take the Heat.
Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to pick against the Heat either. I think LeBron's really at the prime of his powers, and I think one way or another he's going to drag this team to its his third championship in Dwayne Wade's fourth.
So this wraps up the Rosenblog's first ever podcast, the first episode of the Gark Show featuring special guest Mo Eltahir. Thank you, Mo. We hope you enjoyed watching. Let us know what you think, and it's going to be a great NBA Finals.